Good morning, good day, good evening, good night. We are covering all the time zones, Kabul, hopefully Bamiyan and Paktia. In Japan, we have Hiroshima, Tokyo, Beppu in the south, and I think at least one other location. We have all our friends in Afghanistan, the most important. And we have this time Seattle, Denver, Phoenix, and a few sites in California. So it's a really global exercise. This is a very different exercise from what we have done till now, but it's not a very different exercise from the teams that have gone through the Afghan fellowship, because we have done this before. I think for every one of us here, it is clear, even if we are not from a botanical garden background, that we need a multidisciplinary approach to make botanical gardens reality. I heard today, actually, the most important connection for botanical gardens would be with business schools, because they have to, botanical gardens must be able to prove and demonstrate why they are so important. 750 million people in the world visit botanical gardens every year. And yet people don't think that biodiversity loss is as important or is as important to the economy as people do, for example, for climate change. So this workshop is very special because it really pushes the necessity of a multidisciplinary approach. And I really hope that the Paktia University team, Kabul University team, Bamiyan University team really start building this multidisciplinary approach. Grant writing and fundraising exercise, you have all either done it or have worked with groups that have had to do it. Our ambition is that you will build the skills that will allow you over 5-10 years to come to keep building components of the botanical garden and seeking funding internationally and otherwise, because there is funding for botanical gardens, that's for sure. The amounts are really not even close to some of the other development projects, but somehow we have not successfully been able to tap and prove that botanical gardens are a good investment. So this is the ambition of today. We have one of the most important veterans of the Afghan fellowship, someone who has worked with Humaira Kamal and myself, and in fact, with many of the other fellowship alumni for many years. I calculated that Dr. Michael Force has basically been working with us in some capacity for almost close to a quarter century, 23 years roughly. You have Dr. Force's background. He is truly multidisciplinary. When we started the work together, he was working at Intel, then Microsoft. Today, he's responsible for huge teams and human resources development at Boeing. He has worked in academia. He continues to teach at Stanford, at Columbia, and various other universities. He has been very active in the international community. Notably, he has worked as and continues to work as the chair of the UNITAR board for the Division of Prosperity. Most importantly, Dr. Force has worked with us in the design of the curriculum and training in the Afghan fellowship. So he is very familiar with Afghanistan. He's very familiar with the realities of Afghanistan. And I think that you will see he is with us for the long term. And that really gives Humaira, myself, and all the team, Yuko, Taiga, everyone else, really great pleasure to welcome him. But we won't be able to do this alone. And so I'm very happy today. We will also have some feedback from Professor Saburi, Najib Saburi from Kabul University, and Mr. Najib Ahmadzai in Paktia, because both of them have been through the Afghan Fellowship. They have been some of the pillars of the Afghan Fellowship. They're extremely experienced in what we're going to touch today. So Michael, Humaira, Najib Ahmadzai, and Najib Saburi will work with us today. The session will unfold as follows. We will have the main presentation right after this introduction. Then Humaira will facilitate the interventions by the other speakers. Then we will open the floor to some of your questions and answers. And then Humaira will wrap up for the next steps. And we will have Dr. Ari Novi, who is the chair of the AFLP BGNet, to conclude the workshop in an hour and a half. Thank you for being there, everyone. Good luck. This is an ongoing workshop, so we don't need to understand everything in one sitting. It will be recorded and the material will be shared with you and all your colleagues. Michael John, thank you for staying the course with us, and you have the floor.
Thank you, Nazreen. It's so great to be with you all. I'm so glad to be still on the journey with Nazreen and Humaira. When we started 23 years ago, never knew what it would turn into, but I feel the same way about Afghanistan and Japan, for that matter. You know, we've gone to Japan a number of times and feel a very deep connection to Japan and the culture. But Afghanistan, I follow every day as well. And I'm watching the news. I'm thinking about all of you, hoping you're safe, hoping things are improving there. I think our Afghan Fellows program ran for about 14 years, and we're still involved. We did a program recently for Afghanistan, some of you may know about, with women engineers, teaching them entrepreneurism and artificial intelligence, with some coaching from professors in Japan. Some Stanford modules helped with the entrepreneur part, and trying to see if the lady engineers could start a small business with knowing some of the new technologies. So the greatest moments, I've done different things, as Nazreen mentioned, but the greatest moments have been able to connect in this kind of an environment with all of you through UNITAR, Afghanistan, Japan. You know, that partnership, that connection, it's real. And so I'm really here as a resource for you, more than anything, just to see what I can do to help and to care, deeply about all of you and where things are headed. Feel strongly about botanical gardens as well. I think they're very important to protect indigenous plants, but also to help with climate change and protect history and culture, the plants and trees. And it's all a part of history leading forward. We don't want to lose these amazing species. So I think Humaira may just have a few opening words. Humaira, do you want to say a few words, and then I'll start off with the slides and we'll work through some of the content?
Sure. Thank you, Michael. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. And again, good evening and good morning to everybody else. Just a few notes. We wanted to frame this workshop in terms of the realities on the ground. And we also wanted to make sure that you understand why we are going through this exercise. So as universities, you know that because you are nonprofit organizations, funding is constantly needed. And of course, in the case of Afghanistan, many of the countries in that region, the ministries of higher education manage the universities. So a lot of the times funding comes to the ministries and then is redirected to the universities. However, because this is a project from the university, originating from the university, you have to tell the ministry what you need. And therefore, we feel that it's important to make sure that you have a developed proposal, a developed story that you want to tell about your project, so that as soon as the ministry is able to raise funds for you, and you can submit it to them. So fundraising can be interdepartmental or interorganizational as well as external. So that's why it's important to go through the exercise. You need to be clear about what you're asking for, why you need it, and how you're going to do it. And then whoever is willing to fund it, whether it's the university, whether it's the ministry, whether it's external agencies, your story should be shared with all of them the way you want it to be. So that's why we wanted to make sure that we all know how to develop and write our story as a fundraising or grant proposal. The other thing I wanted to mention is that at the moment, we're going to talk about how a comprehensive fundraising proposal is written. Now, all those elements are important, but it's important to know that sometimes you need a large scale fund and sometimes you are approaching a small scale fund. We are at the moment going to learn how to write a proposal and then talk about how to scale it to a seed fund grant proposal. So it's important to make sure all your elements are there and then pick and choose from it what you need to ask for the money you're asking for. Lastly, a small housekeeping note, because we want to make sure everybody gets to know each other. Whenever we speak, maybe we could say, I'm Humaira from UNITAR and say what I want to say, and everybody else could just say, I'm Professor Kohistani from Kabul University, etc., so that people are constantly aware of who's talking, because sometimes the camera doesn't focus on the speaker. So again, thank you very much. We are so glad you're here, and I give it back to Michael.
You were able to see me and see my slides okay?
Yeah.
Oh, great. I like a couple things of what you said, Humaira. First, that you used the term seed funding. Fits so well with botanical gardens and connects so well to all the work Nazreen's been doing for the years around the trees from Hiroshima. Anyway, this is about a 30-minute or less workshop. I've pulled together a lot of materials on grant writing and fundraising and tried to consolidate them, distill them down for you. And, I'll hit some themes as we go through here. You may have already read the slides, so I won't read every word, but I'll highlight things that I think are really important. And, I think grant writing and fundraising has changed a lot in the last few years. There's been a greater emphasis on metrics and knowing that you're having impact. And some of this came from some of the large foundations. The Gates Foundation, for one, was pushing for business-like metrics and indicators. And so you'll see an emphasis on taking a perspective of the donor and what they want to get done, so that you're writing that so that they're meeting their needs, but also that there's a baseline of data and there's some metrics to measure the impact later. So a couple themes like that have changed over the last few years with grant writing and fundraising. So I just thought this slide, would talk about really what we're doing to, I'm trying to go back. The objectives of this session, let's start there. It's really what we're trying to achieve and how to get there. Some basic concepts in fundraising. So we'll get to some real strong elements of what it takes to do fundraising well, and some thoughts about who you're going after as a donor. As Humaira mentioned, it may be a government ministry and things flow through them, or it could be a foundation or a nonprofit or a business. So a lot of these concepts will stay, and we'll look at the motivation of the donors so you can tap into that. But then we'll get into the specifics of developing a proposal for grants and really look at the components of what goes into this overall project proposal. There are some typical elements that are usually seen. They're pretty common across a lot of different proposals for different organizations. And then we want to hear from some of our experts. So we talked about Najib talking about grant writing and fundraising from their perspective in Afghanistan. So what are the best practices that they've seen on the ground in Afghanistan over years? And then finally, we'll talk about just the overall assignment and the project that we want you to do as a result of all this. So that's what we're here to do over the next, hour and 15 minutes or so. Any questions, comments? By the way, we can keep this informal. I'll certainly pause for questions and comments along the way. But if you have any comments or questions, you could stop me along the way. Okay, we'll keep going. So I wanted to start, after reading a lot of information about grant writing and fundraising, I wanted to start with a vision and just say, what are we really trying to achieve here? There were a lot of slides with a lot of words that I was reviewing and a lot of writing of books. I have one near here. One's called the only grant book you'll ever need, or something like that. And so anyway, I was going through a lot of research on this, a lot of books on it, and a lot of slides and information. And it just made me think we need a slide to just level set on what we're trying to do. And what are we trying to achieve with our vision? And it really is that you're trying to sell a vision for a botanical garden based upon a need to have that garden. And it's really in the form of a story. Yes, you need to fill out all the elements and have a budget and all that, but it's more the story that's important to be compelling, with this sense of urgency to get something done, and to be able to show that you can effectively do project planning. And we'll talk later, probably in a future session, about world-class project planning, what goes into it. And those of you who've been through the Afghan program have seen a lot of this, but it's the worldwide benchmark, not just for businesses, but also for governments and nonprofits, is really the PMI Institute. It's Program Management Institute, the International Institute. And there's a PMP certification. What we want to see basically in this kind of proposal is that you're incorporating the right elements to do grant and fundraising appropriately. And so in a lot of cases, it's built upon a foundation of some really core project plan elements, and it's backed by data. So the more you can have some data behind what you're talking about, the better. And then you write it from the perspective of the donor based on their goals. And so one of the best ways to attract money is to speak about what you're doing as if you're in the mind of the donor. You know what they're trying to achieve. You've researched them. You know what their goals are. You're just showing them how they can achieve their goals through you and through your plans. So in this case, creating a botanical garden, you're just helping donors to achieve that end result that they think is important, and you're the vehicle to help get it done. And you're really the best team to do it. And then, so you're helping the donor and any other beneficiaries who will benefit from the botanical gardens to meet their needs. So it's really taking yourself out of your body and mind, and putting yourself in the mind of the donor and the beneficiaries, and channeling them in the form of a proposal. And so how you do it is to create a relationship with whoever is giving the money. Again, it can be a government ministry, it could be an NGO, it could be a company, a business, private sector, through a well-written proposal that tells this story. And it's really, though, creating a connection with the donor or sponsor. I think a lot of people make the mistake of sending in a proposal and maybe never meeting with anyone. They see it as a one-time event, but it's really a series of meetings. It's a series of meetings before and after you're submitting the proposal, if you can access the donor or people who know the donor, to better understand them and to create a connection with them, so they get to know you and start to believe in what you can achieve. And it always helps to create an emotional picture for them of why a botanical garden is so important. Maybe the region's never had one before. Maybe there's a loss of really important indigenous plants and trees, or it looks bleak for the future if there isn't a botanical garden about these surviving or becoming extinct. Also, I think you could add in, climate change, and I think you'll be able to pull together the right emotional picture that gets to someone, not just as, oh, do we fund this or not? It's like, why? How could we not fund this? Because of the emotion behind it that it serves. And so you're selling your solution, but you're really tapping into their desire to help emotionally. And so you have the data, you have the project plan elements, and you have the emotion with it. A lot of people say it's the logic and the emotion that wins a proposal. And then you're filling in the story with steps for how you'll go about doing it, following these good project planning elements, and showing how you will achieve impact. So you can tell enough of how you go execute that they believe you, and they can see how it would come to life. And then closing out the proposal with an ask. And if you ever get to make a presentation, definitely remembering to ask, to repaint the vision and the state you're trying to achieve, and why it's better when this botanical garden is up and going And Nazreen was talking about visiting the Denver Botanical Garden, and it's lush and it has so much great instruction about all the plants, that there's this end state of maturity that you want for that botanical garden and all the people who will visit it in the future. And so helping donors see what it will be like, not only next year, but 5 or 10 years from now, and why it's better for everyone is really important. So I just thought that would be something that could help you to see a little bit bigger picture of what we're after. And so you're attracting donors, appealing to their emotion, their desire, their help and logic. Any questions at this point? No. Okay, we'll keep going. So there are concepts in fundraising. So these get at some foundational pieces that you want to have in place. And it starts with your own team and organization. So as you start to ask for grants, you may be asked, well, what are your team or organization or institution's objectives? What are you really trying to achieve as an organization? Why should we fund you on this initiative without really understanding your organization and your team better? And then these development objectives of why and how you're asking for money and from whom, they may ask the bigger picture of how you're trying to develop this botanical garden beyond the proposal you have with them. And your support should reflect institutional needs. And so you need the money to reflect what you're trying to do as an organization. And then you start fundraising with natural prospects. So whatever makes the most sense at the given time. Humera mentioned that right now, maybe funds are coming mostly through ministries, but there are also external providers perhaps. And so given that the landscape of who's providing funding, who are the most natural prospects or donors to go after? And then you're searching for the sources of money within those donors. Just on the right side here, your case needs to reflect the mission of that granting institution. So again, it's putting yourself in the shoes of the people donating money. Does it match their needs, their desire to have impact? Can they be involved along the way? So they're not just giving money and then hoping and expecting you to come back and communicate to them at some point in the future. You're actually involving them along the journey. And you need to do your research up front for the donors to understand their motivations and why they would be giving money. Your ask should be realistic of them. If they can't provide $3 million, we can't ask for $3 million. That's too much. That's outrageous, maybe. And then find and create the relationships with key donors and partners. So it's finding those ways to have meetings with people who are associated with the donor, who can influence them and the donor organization themselves and the key decision makers leading up to you submitting your proposal, if at all possible. And then the point here at the bottom is you really want to do a lot of this background research, relationship building before you really reach out to the donor, because if you try to do this after the fact, it may be too late. So it's getting your house in order and helping to do research or doing research on the donors, knowing how you want to approach them and what to ask for on the right-hand side, that really gets the magic going at a basic level. And so then you want to know, really clearly who these donors are. Who are you targeting? Are they individuals? They might be, some private individual who really cares about botanical gardens, or cares about Afghanistan or the region. Corporations, potentially, nonprofits, foundations, or philanthropy organizations, the government. So we've talked about that, ministries, and then inter-organizational. So it could be within your ministry or within your government, some a combination of organizations. But it also could be more of an international group of organizations. So it could be a combination of organizations. And then just being really clear what you're asking for and knowing what you have already in advance. What do you have that's in kind? What's being given to you, or what do you already have in your inventory of resources, whether it's money or supplies? Are you needing more in-kind resources? Maybe it's donated time of experts. It can definitely be money, cash, or it could be a partnership in building the botanical garden for the future. And then you want to think about contracting and how they fit into this whole plan. And then, again, stop me for any questions. I'll pause here in a moment. On the right-hand side of this slide, it gets at the why people like to give money. And knowing why your donor might give money is important. You know, if it's more communitarian, it means you're doing good. They're doing good because it makes sense for the community. They're giving back to the community. If it's more altruistic, it's more of an obligation, like we should give back. People need to give back for these kinds of things. If it's devout, it's religion-based. And so doing good is God's will. Investors do it because it's good for business. You know, corporations may give to a region, support a botanical garden because they would like to hire people for their organization in the future. And so they're growing a pipeline or doing goodwill to become a good social partner as a business in order to do business in that region. Socialites may just feel it's good to do socially. You know, that's what some of them do. If they happen to have a lot of money and they connect with each other, they socialize and decide what they might want to get together and donate to. The person who repays, so they're doing good in return. They've had some success. They want to give back to society, give back to the region. And that could be people who have come from Afghanistan who really want to still be involved in the country, or maybe they're within the country and have done well and have some resources to give back. And then dynasties are just doing good as a family tradition. So of course they would do it because all their relatives have always done it. So knowing the motivation of the donor really helps you write with that tone to address their motivation. And so it can affect the theme and the tone of the entire proposal. And so again, this is a bit more research of how you go about writing that proposal, knowing who the donors are and what their motivations are, and then being really clear on what you're asking for. Any comments or questions at this point? Humaira, you look like you're going to say something.
Yes. So unless nobody else has a question, I will yield to anybody else who would like to ask a question. Anyone? Okay, so I just wanted to quickly give an example because in another life, that's what I used to do, fundraising. And you know, this whole thing about matching your request with what the donor really wants to do. So you have to read the donor first, right? And so I used to work for this cancer hospital. I don't know if you know about Shaukat Khanum Cancer Hospital. And the Shaukat Khanum Cancer Hospital, what it did was they decided to go after zakat from people, because zakat is for everybody. Zakat is a tool which Muslims give in and it's very well used for hospital care, patient care, and education actually. And so what we did was that we decided that everybody gives zakat in the month of Ramadan, and we're going to ask for it. But the important thing was, we know that the donor wants to give it, but the thing is that you have to make it easy for the donor to give it, because otherwise somebody else will come and ask for it. And if it's easy to give to that person, they will give to that person. And so we had to make sure that our approach to the donors was such that we said, we'll accept your zakat. This is exactly where we'll apply it, because they're giving it for religious reasons. They want to ensure guarantees that we are going to apply it where they want it applied, and then to give them the exact procedure of how to give it. So that was, you know, from individual donors. And then institutional donors, when we talk about the doing good for the community, when corporations decide to do it, the idea is to give them a proposal that will make them come across to their customers as somebody who does good, right? So you have to give them options for recognition, or you have to give them options for, you know, what they get out of it. So I think it's very important to read your donor. And in terms of grant giving, nothing else. For instance, we knew that UN agencies or World Bank had a certain amount of money that they needed to give to a certain number of projects. That was their target. If you have done that research, you know that they are running out of time and they need to spend this money on projects which meet these criteria. You know that you have to move in with your proposal, right? Because their goal will not be met without giving. and your goal will not be met without them giving to you. So I think homework is critical. You need to understand who you're asking from. That's it. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Thanks, Humera. I love that we worked together long enough. I know when you want to say something. I could see it brimming out of you. It was coming out. It was good. Thank you for that. Let's see. Let's go on then to next.
Hello.
Yes. Hello.
Hello. Good morning, everyone. It is Ghulam Hazrat from Bamiyan University. I think about who are the donors. I think in Afghanistan, individuals. I think I don't think which the person find in Afghanistan. Cooperation and also NGO it is, and we try to find, but and also internal organization or government. We think which the government and also the Ministry of Higher Education don't support about this the botanical garden in Bamiyan, because it is the budget is down and also we have problems. If it try to find NGO and cooperation, it is better, I think.
Great. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah, so I think the way we're approaching this workshop is a lot of of course, the elements will play for whoever your donor is, but again, it's writing to that donor. So, as we look at the elements next, there's a great opportunity to say, okay, if it's an NGO that has this kind of mission, you would use the same elements, but just write it slightly differently, toward the mission of that NGO. So the good news is I think we have a framework with elements that'll play either for the government or for NGOs or other donors. It's just a matter of how you write to that donor and research that donor. But thank you for that. So let's get into maybe a bit more about it. What I put here are some principles that you're really writing for the donor, not yourself. I think often in a first draft, you just have to get the words down about your proposal and what you're asking for. And then you have to go back and write it differently, the same content, but differently for the donor, not for yourself. And people sometimes just write, for what they know they need to say for themselves. Using very simple language, but keeping it very interesting. So it's not boring to read. It has a sense of urgency, and it's painting that vision, that in-state vision for the future. And it talks about the data and the impact you can have. It's clear and descriptive text, so very, well written. Think more of a story than a research report. So it needs to come to life. It's simple, it's interesting, but it's descriptive. And avoiding superlatives, so things like fantastic, great, it'll be beautiful. Those things may turn people off because they're not so sure that they can be achieved. If you feel like you're on the defense, where you feel like you're needing to defend the fact you want to do a botanical garden, that won't come over. It won't go over as well as being on the offense. Meaning, why would a donor want to do this? Why does Afghanistan need the botanical garden? Rather than feeling you have to defend a botanical garden. And so I think that's kind of key, because it sounds like budgets are tight these days. So we have to watch the tone of what you say. And then the point here is it's more about fundraising, meaning you're creating friendships with these donors in the sense that you're together partnering to create something that's really important and magical. So it's less about purely asking for money, and it's more about how can you come along on the journey as a partner and become a friend in this effort. Again, as I've mentioned, the baseline data is really important to find out, what's happening today. Is it, are we losing plants and trees? What is going on with the baseline? And then, what's good that's happening, if there's something good, or are things eroding and the data showing something not so good? And then what kind of impact do you think you can have to improve that data if you were to measure it later, a year or 2, 5 years from now? Okay, and then it gets into the proposal components. So this makes up a few of the next slides. Most proposals have these elements in them. They have a cover letter, a title page, a summary sheet that's more like a one-page summary of the proposal, and then most importantly, the project description, because that's the part that they'll read for sure that summarizes really what you're trying to achieve. And we'll talk about that piece. But in a lot of cases, that's what they read more than anything else. And they may not even read your entire proposal, but they will read the project description. So they may make decisions based on that project description. But then you get into more specifics, goals and objectives, activities. You could think of those as what you'll do and milestones to be achieved. Input, what are the resources you have that would come in to do this? And then the output, what you'll produce, what is getting produced around this botanical garden with a timeline expected. Who benefits from the botanical gardens? And then what's the impact back to the baseline? How will you prove some return on investment? Then how will the botanical garden be sustained over time? So how will, if these funds go away or they don't last for years and years and years, who will pick up sustaining and maintaining the botanical garden to keep it growing or to scale other botanical gardens? Then the methodology gets at the processes or policies you'll follow to get there. And finally, the team is really important because that gets at who's involved and who has expertise from your team. Then there's an appendix which gets into a more detailed budget and a few other things. Your board will show you what goes in there. But this tends to be the set of materials that you'll need to do an effective proposal. And we'll just walk through a few of them now just to give you a little bit more depth on what you can do in each of these components. Okay. So the point there was follow these sound principles, and then as you write, make sure you're covering these elements and that you're being necessary and sufficient. So you're writing as much as you need, not too much, not too little, and you're covering the ground of what a donor would like to see. It's it takes some practice, but I think and some editing and rewriting, but it can really pull together and hang together as a nice story that has that emotional tie to it, has some data, and has, again, these project planning elements.
Michael?
Yes, please.
Thank you, Michael. I just wanted to also raise the fact that we are talking not just about funds and financial commitment and contributions, but also in kind, because botanical gardens require a lot of in kind. And referring to the previous question from Bamiyan University, I think we all recognize that probably if we're talking pure funding, we are looking internationally. Mm-hmm. Because if there was funding actually for botanical gardens in Afghanistan, it would have happened till now. Mm-hmm. However, there is going to be a lot of in-kind support that can come from the local community, for example, volunteers or companies giving equipment or giving seedlings. There are all sorts of things that a botanical garden needs that should also be formulated. So in other words, it's not going to be one size fits all, even for a smaller project or component of each botanical garden. There may be a variety of very different donors that we're talking about. So in other words, for the international donor, we absolutely need to look into the literature department or English department, because it has to be in a good, solid English, or we need to have translators. But we also have to develop a language for the local community, for the citizens, for the mayor, for other faculty, for companies in Afghanistan or in the region. So I think all that you're saying, my understanding is it can be adapted to very different profiles of donors. Is that correct?
Oh, yes, I think so. And some of these proposals, you may have versions that are all about only in-kind resources, and not even be asking for money from certain sources. It could be all in-kind cash, or if you're looking to form a partnership, you could use this proposal to to ask people to become partners. And so, yeah, I think, Nazreen, it's really important. The in-kind may be as important or more important than the funding, the financial, but I think you need both. And I think picking which donors you're going after for which kinds of resources, whether it's in-kind, cash, partnership, whatever you're asking for, knowing whether it's an individual, a foundation, an NGO, government, and then what you're asking for from them, and having the whole picture of who you're asking for what, and having it add up. It's like a jigsaw puzzle, so that you're asking for the different pieces you need for that botanical garden. It should be proposals add up to the bigger picture, like a jigsaw puzzle of everything you need for the garden, including what you may already have. Sorry, Humera.
I just wanted to say that, when we talk about in-kind, in one of the places you mentioned about in-kind in terms of partnerships as well, I think that, for instance, each of our university teams could very clearly put in their listing of in-kind contributions the support that they already have with BGCI and UNITAR AFLP. These are resources because they're covering training, which is an in-kind, it's usually, we can evaluate it and put it on the balance sheet, that this is something they will already have in hand. So, we've already got pieces that we can put in university land. There are so many things that they already have in hand.
Yeah, that's great, Humera. Yeah, I think there's a strategy graphic up front that just lays out what you already have, what you need as in-kind, and who you want to ask for it from, cash, and then who you have as a partner, and who you may also still want to partner with. And there should be some strategy document that shows that picture and how it all fits together. Okay. And so then the upfront pieces of this proposal, the kind of point at the bottom of this slide is you need to get this right. They're usually really short, but you want them to be perfect, or someone may not read the project description, which you really want to get them at least to the project description piece, because like I said, that may be all they read, but you don't want to trip them up on these upfront pieces. So the cover letter should be to the individual who can make the decisions directly. So not to an organization, not to, hoping that someone will get it to the right decision maker. So you want it addressed correctly, brief overview of your organization, your purpose, the reason you're asking for resources. Again, it doesn't have to be money. Really short though, cover letter, 1 page recommended, no more than 2 pages, your name and address and your signature. That just starts it all off. I think there should be some hints in there as to the emotional part already, what you're what you want to accomplish and why it's so important. So that part should be, I think, in there. So you're already getting to the emotion and the logical piece. The title page, the point here is, what is the title of your proposal? And is it intuitive? Will someone know what it's about when they see it? But is it also something brief that really is eye-catching, that gets their attention? So it may have a little bit of a sense of urgency and a little bit of the emotion even in the title of your proposal. If it's really long and boring, people will read it as long and boring. It seems like a research paper. And then the summary sheet is a 1-pager, just giving the basic facts about your proposal. So the title, the project type, the location, your organization, who you're asking to donate, duration of the project, start dates, beneficiaries, costs involved. This is just the overview, the really brief nuts and bolts or facts about your initiative around this botanical garden. The question around a narrative is there at the bottom, because some summary sheets come as templates for a proposal, and they may ask for a brief narrative, like a paragraph of what you're trying to accomplish. So there's a question mark there, just because some ask for that, some don't want that, because they'll get more in the project description. So these are all just upfront pieces that you have to get in place for the proposal. More importantly, it gets to this project description. That's what you really want them to read. So they'll skim over those first sections and they'll get to this piece. And this is where you want to spend some time writing. It's not more writing is better. It's the right amount that really gets to this emotion piece, this logic piece. And like it says here, it may be the only part of the submission they read, but having the clear problem statement, the data that you know exists for the proposal, factors that have contributed to the issue or the problem, the opportunity, and then some summary to show that you know what's worked or hasn't worked in the past. So have people tried botanical gardens in your region in Afghanistan before? Why didn't it work? And what were the factors? And then what needs to be done now? So this starts to hint at what you'll go do and why it's so urgent. And all along the way through this project description, there's a tone about convincing them of the importance of the problem and enrolling them in the solution with you. Again, this can be for in-kind or cash or a partnership. All these elements work for any of those levels. So the project description, really important, worth spending a lot of time on, worth writing, rewriting, editing, having others read it to see if it resonates for them. Questions, comments here?
Just one comment. So, you know, when you get a lot of proposals, there has to be something in your proposal which sets you apart or calls attention to your proposal when there are 10 others lying on the desk. And I think for each of these universities, one of those things which really are differentiating these proposals from everybody else is this partnership with which the university teams are working. So they have mentors who are working as consultants to them. You have international and local trainers who are working with them. Not many projects at the state of beginning will have all of this already in place. So I think whenever all these universities, the three of them, write their proposals, we need to have a section in the project description which says this is what sets this project apart. This is why they think it will succeed, because it's really one of the key success factors, KSFs, which differentiates it from other people doing the same thing in the region or in this country. So I think something we want to keep a note of when we do our project descriptions. Over.
Yeah, definitely. That's great. Was there a raised hand earlier? I just looked at the chat. Did we miss? Let's see.
I think Mr. Abdul Waris raised his
Yeah.
hand.
Yeah.
Is there a question?
Question or comment?
Abdul Waris. No, if not, we can get back to it at the end.
Okay. Yeah, and I think the other thing about a project description, the reason it needs to stand alone and should have that impact to the reader is it could get cut and pasted. You know, this section might be the summary that gets passed around instead of copying or sending around the entire proposal to people who will want to know and read it. It may be just this section that gets cut and pasted. All right, and then we get into more specifics. So if those of you who went through the Afghan Fellowship Program or those of you who have your PMI or PMP certificate, you'll start to see this takes it down another layer. I think it's really convincing the donor of what you're trying to do and that you're the right team to do it and you know what you want to go accomplish. So the goals and objectives, you know, how will you break down your solution into the top 3 to 5 objectives that need to be accomplished? And why are those so worthy for the investment of resources, whatever they are? And then the activities get at, okay, how will you go accomplish those goals and objectives? So it's drilling down. And it's use of verbs like you'll go recruit or design or develop or launch or train. You know, it's more verbs about what you'll go do so they understand the activities to accomplish those goals and objectives. And then the inputs are really that summary that I mentioned to the jigsaw puzzle of the pieces you need, the money, the people, the time, you know, hardware, software, you know, resources, seeds, whatever those resources are that you need as inputs to be successful as a team. And that's where I think it'll be really good to look back to that one-page strategy graphic that shows everything you have and everything you need and who you need it from and who you'll partner with. And then step 8 here is the output. So what tangibly will you produce? And so I like to think of them as deliverables. So it's tangible output with ownership and metrics. And it's something that can be touched and seen and felt. It's a tangible deliverable. And so it's goods, it's services, it's competencies improved, it's products, it's something that comes out from the inputs. You take the inputs and you create those outputs. And with it, it's good to be able to show a high-level timeline of when these things will be produced. So at least they have a high-level sense of your timeline. You may not have to go into really nitty-gritty detail of exactly what you'll do. Like sometimes where I work, we talk about work weeks, 52 work weeks. And what are you doing in work week 4 and 14 and 28? And this is more, I think, a high-level timeline to show them when you'll start producing major deliverables that tie back up to the goals and objectives. So it's the right altitude or level of detail in a timeline at that point. And then there's usually a section around the beneficiaries and the evaluation impact. So who will benefit? I mean, certainly people who come to the botanical garden, universities will benefit, the government could benefit, who benefits from the botanical garden? Why is life better by having this botanical garden? And then of course, the thing I mentioned, because so many donors want data, they want to see how the baseline data is improved. So whatever you said was the current state today that you wanted to improve, whatever that metric is, you want to show how you will have improved it. And realistically, how much improvement is expected, because they may start to say, really, do you think you can do that? Or over that period of time, 1 year, 2 years? Again, back to the Denver Botanical Garden, which took probably years to get to its maturity level. And then there's the question of who benefits indirectly. So there are direct beneficiaries, but there may be a lot of other people who benefit indirectly from the botanical garden. And who are they? Then it gets to what's measured. So how will you be able to really prove yourself? Not just the baseline data, but is there some process that you want to measure to show that you're mature? Or quantity of things produced, number of plants or trees, quality of what you're producing, and then satisfaction, maybe of people who come to the garden, or the experts who know that there's satisfaction in the way, the number and type of plants that you have in the garden. So then there's some plan that you could summarize around how you're going to evaluate, when, the timeline for evaluation, and the communications around the evaluation. And a lot of donors want to know how you'll continuously mature and improve over time. So there's that section. Number 10 gets at when all this support goes away. Like maybe it's a donor providing resources for a year or 3 years. How will it be supported? Will the botanical garden fall apart? Will there be weeds growing and the trees will, they won't be watered? What happens when the external support is gone? How does it carry forward? How do the benefits continue for those beneficiaries? And the evaluation data keeps improving. So maintenance, sustaining, improvement, and will it be scaled out to others beyond, this initial audience? Is there a plan to attract more people to one botanical garden, or maybe to grow more botanical gardens that spawn off this one that you're creating? And so you want to say how will it be sustained? So a longer term plan. So it's having the clear target audience, the improvement of the baseline, and showing that you can sustain it over time. Okay, and then just the last couple here, your methodology. And I really debated in my mind about putting this further up front, but I think at some point donors just want to know how you're going to go about it. They may say, well, there's this law, or there's this policy. How are you ever going to get this done given that policy or that law? Or the way, gardens need to be created, if there's some, rules. So some people who are real sticklers to policies and laws and rules will want to know the methodology you're going to take, or maybe it's someone who has expertise in botanical gardens and they want to understand a bit more about the methodology of growing a garden. So you want to be ready to speak to donor questions that might go into your approach and your methodology and your processes. because some people, they just won't feel comfortable until they know more about that. And then along with that are who are the key sponsors and stakeholders to help you along the way, because those are people who can help you break through the barriers of policies and rules and laws to help get a botanical garden established. Who makes decisions, and then how will any evaluation and monitoring take place? Meaning, this isn't so much about the evaluation metrics, it's more about the governance and of the method and what you're putting in place. So evaluation and monitoring. Then finally, the team, because you're almost like a startup business. And one of the things I do in another life, mostly with Stanford, is help startup businesses. And the investors are like donors. They want to invest in what they think is a good product or service that's being created, in this case, a botanical garden. But as importantly, they're investing in people, and they want to know that the people can do this work, and that they know that maybe the plans will change and things won't go exactly the way it was laid out in your proposal. But they want to know that the team will be able to pivot or adjust, and that they have the expertise to still continue to execute as things change, as laws change, as rules change, as the weather changes, as funding or resources change. That this is a team that will get a botanical garden done and figure it out. And so they may invest even more in how you come across in your proposal and when they meet you than your actual plan. It's confidence in the team. So you want to show with your organization, why do you have core competence? Why are you good at this? Why would you be able to put on a botanical garden? What are your strengths as an organization? And what successes have you had that you can pull forward and tell as stories that, yep, we've had tough times before when we've done something like this, or even a different initiative. It may not be a botanical garden, but we succeeded. We overcame these obstacles. We can make this happen. And then the specific individual members on the team, which expertise do they have, one by one, person by person, that's relevant to this? So having short biographies, or just little, even short write-ups or bullet points about the people who are involved and why they have the expertise to do this. And then, of course, gets to the backing of this whole set of teams and the international, partnership that are on this line from California and all over, being able also back up the teams and the proposal. For donors to know that exists is really important. So it's, you understand the methods to get it done, and you have the team to do it, and the competence to get it done. All right, and then finally, you have attachments. So you could talk about your organization, the board, again, this coalition, the staff that you have behind the scenes with resources who can help support. That's really important because it's more than just your core team. Any partners who are involved, who Mara mentioned, list the partners you have already. Any letters of support and recommendation for the team, and then a detailed budget. And we'll get into this in more detail at another point in time. But providing at least in the appendix a draft proposal of what the budget looks like, to show that you thought it through, and at least initially this is what it looks like, and you have your act together. So you're a legitimate organization. You can prove what you're going to do with the money, and that you're backed well through these attachments. And there's a last slide here that just shows, for botanical gardens, the line items that you need to think about for a budget for a botanical garden. And we won't go into all this now. I just wanted to show you that it's in here, and we can think about it another time. But it's just some good things to ask questions. Are you thinking, you might want this either in the near term or mid to long term for these different line items for a botanical garden budget? And so we won't go into that now. But that's really it. And, I want to make sure we have time to hear from Najib and anyone else who has background in Afghanistan and fundraising and grant making. And so maybe turn it over. Humaira, do you want to lead that and get into the assignment after the people talk, after we get to hear from?
I think we should first listen from our two Najibs, and then we can wrap it up with the assignment. Sure.
Yep. And we don't have Zakir on the line, right? Zakir was another. person?
Zakir is not going to be there. No,
Zakir's not here.
Yes. So, who would like to go first? Sabri, would you like to begin, or Ahmed Zai?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I can.
Okay. Why don't you begin, and then Ahmed Zai can wrap it up.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Thank you, Michael.
You have
for
5
your,
minutes.
yeah, for your always inspiring and informative presentations, and you have covered almost all the aspects of fundraising and grant writing, and I think that's a perfect picture that need to be considered. I was about when coming to Afghanistan context, I was thinking that because I am in academia and we are also working, the 3 universities are here, and this is the botanical garden for the university, so it would be a good topic of research, that how the grants worked in the last 20 years, because there have been a lot of fund for grants, mini grants from international and donors and national entities, that how it worked, were they effective or not. So that would be a good experience and a good research topic to work on. From my own perspective and experience about the grants, in Afghanistan, we have been focusing more on the international grants from the last 20 years. Before that, there have been also some international organizations engaged to support Afghanistan community, but the local grant concept is still there. We have some mechanisms to support, to get some support from the businesses, from the elders and the people who are wealthy, and as Humayra mentions about the zakat and the other local setups, the religious, the Islamic setup that is available. But nowadays that is more faded out because of these modern and the new grant opportunities. But still, we have the experience of getting those funds for our use. Let me talk about the NGO. The NGO we established at the engineering school at Kabul University, called EPRSO, Engineering Partnership Research and Service Organizations. That was actually initiated by our partner university, Kansas State University. They were here in Kabul University for 3 years, and they proposed this mechanism, a mechanism that is in the university but managed from by different stakeholders who were not in the university. Because at that time and still now, we don't have a system, a structure that could manage the external fund directly. So the solution was to have a supporting mechanism to channel all those funds on the grants, the projects. So we were able to get a lot of fund from the businesses, from the industry, from the individuals in Afghanistan and also outside Afghanistan. We have been working on a playground and the landscape of engineering school, and we were able to get more than $100,000 US. We started with the students' support. We initiated a campaign. We asked the students and then the faculty to contribute. And we initially started something. Then we went out broader to the alumni of the engineering school and reached them. So they contributed something. And then we went to USAID and we were able to prepare a proposal. Of course, not as broad as you explained, but we covered some point of that, because at that time USAID had a lot of fun to disperse and different forms, so we were able to get a big other portion. And we also, of course, we presented to them that this is what we have done so far, this is what we need, and they have been able to provide us some fund, and that mechanism is still active at the engineering school, but recently, because of not having enough running fund to operate the organization, that's kind of in a hibernate mood. But still, that's a good example that I wanted to share with our university colleagues and also our international partners and AFLP, UNITAR, and BUCI, that is something that could work in Afghanistan context, because university is not able to get money because directly, and even if they write something, write a proposal, there should be a mechanism. Either it could be AFLP or it could be UNITAR, or maybe a combination of that. Maybe also we can engage the EPRSO somehow in this process to make it a sustainable and long-term move, because we cannot immediately start from writing a proposal, as you mentioned in your presentation, Michael. That this is that might be a second or third stage. The first stage is to plan everything, and make everything clear, the goals and the needs, the timeline, and then we can move forward. That will convince the donors, whoever they are, if they are the international donors, if they are the local. And I would suggest strongly to more work on the local donors also, because we have potential, and that is more sustainable and long term. We can easily see what is going on, and their feedback and I can say if their criticism will be more effective, because you see if they spend their money and they see that little work is done, so maybe they will be frustrated and see, oh, why it doesn't work. So it will be a kind of forcing tool for us, for universities, and for this, if I can say, the botanical garden. This will be a good example. And let me, the effective use of these funds. We in Afghanistan, most of the funds were not effectively used. This is my own perspective. Maybe that is I could not generalize it, but I can say because the grants were provided for some short-term goals, and they were not linked to something long-term. So maybe some grants could be successfully spent, but most of them disappeared. It was part of one-time projects. We can call it a project. But these, the grants that we are talking about, it is a lifetime. I can say it is the generations. For the botanical garden, it's not a one-time project, or it's not a short time. This is for generations. So the planning part of it should be very clear. And as Nasreen and Humaira, we had in our initial discussions that the botanical garden, this is a long-term project and need to be somewhere, and we need to be based and operated somewhere that is for long-term. Universities or something that is for long-term, and they could stay for long-term and could operate it efficiently. So enabling.
I think that is the perfect note to wrap up. I'm really sorry, because I think what you're saying is very important. It really is an excellent solution to the problem that we think that the universities may have in direct fundraising. So I think what you're saying is absolutely right, and I think we should make a note of that. I want to come back to that, but maybe we can let Najib make his comments as well, and then we'll open the floor to everybody to respond to you or ask further.
Yeah, when you said Najib, I thought I have two time, 5 minutes. I didn't.
You're absolutely right.
Okay, Najib, please. Go ahead.
Please go ahead.
Okay. Should I start? Thank you. Thank you, Michael, for very informative information again. But also, I have some points that I think I can add to what you just said. I think most of the points you have already covered. But based on my experience while working in Ministry of Finance as Director for Special Projects Unit, at the same time at Revenue Department, so I have that bit experience dealing with the donors. So, but I think while working in Afghanistan is different, I think, from working in any part or other part of the country, of the world, sorry. And at the same time, I think the geographic limits affects your proposals a lot. For example, the Paktia's team proposal would be very much different from the proposal of Bamiyan University, and at the same time from Kabul University, because their location affects a lot. And based on my experience, I've seen that your location and your requirement affects your proposal a lot. And then I think based on my experience, I can say that before applying for a project or sending a proposal to your donor, you have to know the overall environment. For example, in 2001 and 2002, the situation was totally different from what it is now. At that point of time, project approval was just away from sending an email. You just send an email and you just asked the donor. At that point of time, the project got accepted. But now situation, I think, has changed. The situation has got saturated, have got more professional, so that the team, particularly the Paktia's team, need to be stronger. They have to put their case much more effectively to the donor. Secondly, I think while working in Afghanistan, the situation, again, I would say is different. For example, while I was working in Ministry of Finance, you have to see the interest of your donor. For example, I was working in Ministry in Revenue Department, so DFID was involved with Revenue Department. If you applied for USAID for a proposal, they were simply not interested in Revenue Department. So what they were doing, they were interested in Customs Department. At the same time, when you come to other departments of Ministry of Finance, so DFID was involved with Treasury Department, while USAID was involved with Budget Department. So the point I'm trying to say is that you have to see the interest of your donor. As Nasreen said, that we need to focus internationally for the donor, and because if there was local donors, so such project should have been implemented before. I would not agree with that, because I think this concept of botanical gardens are a bit new to Afghanistan. So I'm sure there are donors locally available. So we might go and just ask Ministry of Agriculture or Department of Environmental Protection, so to ask them which donors are actually is dealing with these environmental sort of projects. Then the geographic limits also affects a lot. For example, I would say, and I would give the example, we have got a German donor by name of GIZ. So what happens is that GIZ simply does not operate in the southern and other parts of the country. They simply operate in northern parts of the country. So what I want to say is that you need to analyze, you need to get more information before applying for a proposal about your donor, because your donors' interests and all those things, you have to take those into consideration. Thirdly, every donor have their own interests. So what makes, I think, a proposal more effective is that you have to wrap in your interest into the interest of your donor. So that means you have to pre-analyze your donor and look for in what are the major point of interest for them, and then see your project and then make proposal in such a way that matches both interests. So if that's not the case, I think donors will not be simply will not be interested into your project. Then the other point that I've seen practically is, and Michael also have rightly pointed out, is the confidence of your people. I think making a good proposal is not the task done and finished. It doesn't mean that you made a good proposal and your project is got implemented. The team should have a full-fledged command or each and every aspect of the project. They have to have every point, detailed point in their fingertips, because the getting proposal and of course with reference to botanical garden, it would not be a simple amount. So while sitting with the donor and while convincing them, they have to see that there is something in the team which is proposing a particular idea. So the point is that the universities and the team have to have command over each and every aspect, detailed aspect of the project. For example, they can simply ask a simple question during these negotiations. If that might be a simple point, but if the team was not prepared, I think all the idea might get lost. So the point is that you have to have a strong command over your idea. Since the time is limited, so I will give again a simple example based on my experience. While I was working in a special project unit of revenue department, so I applied for at the same time I was a fellow in Afghanistan fellowship program as well. So we applied for our project. That was our two projects basically. There was an oral project that has two components. One was customer awareness, and then the second was a client service unit. So what I did was that I simply went and applied to a donor. There was by name of Harakat, and what I got the information was that Harakat got the main funding from DFID, and DFID was already involved with ARD. So it was very much easy for me to get those funding, and I was able to get around about 1.7 million USD for small tax office of revenue department. Thank you, Humera. I think 10 seconds are also remaining. So that's all the points I wanted to cover. Thank you.
Thank you, Najib. Perfect timing. I just sent him a message saying 30 seconds and he wrapped it up quickly. So I think that both our Najibs, as always, have delivered on some really great ideas. We are with 10 minutes to the end of time, and I want to leave some time for our closing statement. So, Michael, I was thinking that maybe we could just, I'd just like to mention what these slides are about and not go into much detail. If anybody wants to ask any follow-up questions, I'm happy to answer them by email. Please feel free to contact me about the assignment and any other information that's on these slides. So, Tiger, maybe you could share my email address with everybody in your next email to the group. But this is the last few slides that Michael and I had are primarily about focusing on a small grant proposal. And the reason why we suggest we start with that is because in most grant writing, people suggest that you test yourself and you hone your skills on a smaller scale grant proposal and then graduate to the larger one. I think also in our case, because our process of botanical garden building will be a long process, we may need from time to time small portions which need to be funded as we go along. And so as much as we need to have our grand master plan, out of that, we may pick up some pieces and say, we need money for this now. So this is our first attempt to exercise our skills. And so as an exercise, as part of the fundraising training, we would like to focus on a small project, a small section, a small piece of the large botanical garden plan, from starting it to developing it fully. And so after discussions with mentors, we came up with 3 possibilities. One was, of course, the finding and collecting of rare species. The other is a small infrastructure requirement, such as a small solar-powered power generator, or maybe some small tube well or something to get some water supply to the garden, depending on each site's requirements. And the last option was, of course, getting money for funding a professional landscape architect to develop our master plan. These 3 are suggestions. Of course, if the university team has other ideas, has something else which is specifically needed right now, they may want to focus on that, and we can discuss that through email, or get feedback on that from mentors. Number 1 is an interesting and important suggestion, because when you see the donor lists, in most parts, many of the donors, one of the first priorities is the finding and collecting of plant species. It's an easier thing to aim for, because you will need it in your universities, whatever your plant species may be. But it's also something that many grant funds hold as a priority. Michael, could we go to the next slide?
Sure.
So I just wanted to flag here that this is a list of, there are 2 links here on top, which give us lists of grants that, courtesy of BGCI and some other research that we identified. There are many lists out there, but of the list, the 2-3 which are we know are good options, because Abby Meyer, one of your mentors, has also guided us on that, are the first 2 ones. They are very specific. They want to work in international arenas in other countries. They also are specific to botanical gardens and small size funds. However, it is important to note that when I went through this list, and you will go through this list, 2-3 things you have to make sure you look at. Number 1, what is the regional focus of this grant? Not everybody is focused on other countries. Not everybody is focused even outside the US. So you have to check on that. Secondly, of course, their priorities. Do they match what you are looking for? They may be interested in trees, but not necessarily in a garden. They may just be interested in reforestation of wild areas. So you have to make sure you understand what the criteria is before you focus on any. I would suggest you look at these. Maybe, of course, the easier ones are the first 2, which we know, but look at the others 2 just as options, because some of them may not be useful now, but may be useful in the future. And then, of course, there are many others. Next slide, Michael. So given that, I have presented as a case study the requirements of the BGCI's Global Botanic Garden Fund, which was the first on the list in the previous slide. And they have very simple, very clear, basic requirements. Now, these, every grant will have it. You have to make sure whatever proposal you write, you have to make sure you cover these points, because those are the ones they're asking for. Everything else will be a bonus and over and above that. Everything else will be things that you feel that the grant organization needs to know about your project to complete your story, or that for your story to stand out. So please keep these in mind as you develop your proposal, so that all other elements included, these should also be there. Next slide. And finally, this is the workshop assignment that we hope you will work on from tomorrow till September 10th is the deadline. We want you to pick a project, pick the donor out of the lists that you have, and do your research and come up with a proposal that you think you would like to submit. It is important for you, and I think it will make the case to highlight 2-3 things. One is the infrastructure you already have in place supporting the project, which is your international partnerships, your training availabilities from your international partners, mentors, and advisors, as well as the in-kind contributions already made by the university. And finally, the thing that you will also add, I think always as an annex to whatever proposal, whether you're asking for a small amount or a large one, is your design vision and the draft that you will eventually do for your request for proposals from the architect. These are important because they give credibility to your project, that there is an end goal in sight and this is just one of the steps. The donor needs to know that this is part of a bigger strategy. So you will need to make sure that you include those items in your proposal. I think that is all from my end. As I said, I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have. I would like to pass the floor to Michael to say any last words, and then to Ari to wrap up the workshop. And I'm hoping that, Ari, maybe you could also make a comment on whether you ever had experiences of funding small parts of your botanical gardens first or in the interim as opposed to the whole. Over to Michael and then Ari. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Humaira. Well, I'm just impressed at the stories from Najib and Najib, their experiences with grant making and fundraising, because it really puts it in the context of Afghanistan and what's been done. So really appreciate both of you spending time to prepare and think through, your 5-minute presentation on what your experience and how it could benefit everyone on the call. So thank you so much. Yeah, and I think what the good news is a lot of us are all thinking alike about what a proposal should look like. And even the one Humaira just showed is a subset of what we talked about earlier in the session. So it sounds like we're all headed a good direction together. And it's just inspiring to me to think about Afghanistan and what can be done there around botanical gardens, indigenous species, and creating, beautiful gardens for the future that, again, like was said, Najib mentioned, we're talking long-term to last for generations. So this is a part of the legacy of everyone on this call. And so it's exciting. It's how do you want to leave the world a better place for future generations? And this is an excellent way to do it through botanical gardens. So just want to say thank you. I'm excited to see the proposals in September. And just appreciate all your work on it between now and then, and your dedication, energy, and inspiration. Ari, should we go over to you?
Sure. Thank you so much. And I just want to thank everybody for having me here. It's so inspiring. Every time I participate in one of these workshops, I'm more convinced with each passing meeting that this idea is, not only great but truly outstanding. And will succeed in creating really, really special gardens in Afghanistan that can stand the test of time. I'll quickly address Humaira's question, about whether we use small grants on our way to bigger things, and the simple answer to that is absolutely. I think whenever you're trying to find funding, it's always a crooked path. We certainly, when we're thinking of new ideas or trying to test the waters, we will apply for, a smaller grant or try to find a funder to give maybe a little bit of seed money, just a small amount, really just to test the concept, to not spend too much time on a very large proposal. And that's, really wonderful. But conversely, we also sometimes, even with a new idea, go for a really big grant that's incredibly competitive. And maybe requires a lot of work. And oftentimes we know that the chances of getting that grant are very, very low. But because we've spent a lot of time putting together a really complicated grant, we have that, that's effort that can be mined. And so as you spend a lot of time on one grant proposal, and part of the output of that has value is all of this writing that you've done and all of this thought that you've put into a new initiative or program. And so when other granting opportunities come up, or you find an individual donor or institutional donor that may be interested, you've kind of got everything already together for them as well. So I think we try almost every which way, and it's really sometimes hard to predict exactly where the successes are going to be. And I think the one most important quality I've always found in fundraising in general, and grant writing in particular, is simply perseverance. Just keep going at it, and recognize the idea is good, and the impact is there. And in this project, that's absolutely the case. That eventually, the right funder will come along and help make things move forward. So just to maybe close, I'm really thrilled that I keep hearing from everybody the importance of stories. I think sometimes it's easy to fall into the technical aspect of funding acquisition and trying to dot all the I's and cross all the T's and make sure all the grammar is perfect. And those things are certainly very, very important. But at the end of the day, people, decisions are made based on stories. And one of the things that excited me most about engaging with this group was, when I got, some of the first looks at the plant lists that the gardens wanted to implement, that, the plants that the gardens will be made up of, just the physicality of it. And, Afghanistan is such an amazingly important and historical place, going back to really the beginning of civilization. And I looked at the plant lists and I thought, my gosh, this plant list of the indigenous plants of Afghanistan from all of the gardens was at the base of culture all over the world, at the base of religion, at the base of identity, at the base of shared meaning, at the base of storytelling itself and mythology and just how we think of ourselves as human beings. And that story is such a compelling story, for any funder who's interested in plants and what they mean in society and what they can mean for education and what they can mean for climate change and the economic and environmental integrity of the future. It's such a compelling story, maybe the most compelling story I've ever seen in all of my years dealing with botanic gardens and plants. And so I think the trick here is translating that story, getting it out onto the page, telling the story in a way that people can understand, because rarely in my life have I seen a cause so worthy and so exciting and so expansive. We heard also the idea that the Botanic Garden is supposed to stay for generations, and that's a safe bet. Botanic gardens are hard to start historically all over the world, but once they start, they become permanent and really durable features of a culture and a society, and that's really well documented in history as well. So this is hard work, but it's work that, when it bears fruit, will bear fruit for a very, very long time. Well beyond the lifetime of any of the people involved in this. And there's no greater gift to the future than planting trees that will continue to bear fruit well beyond the lives of those who planted them. And so both literally and metaphorically, that's a big part of what's being done here. And it's exciting, and I'm thrilled to be a part of it. And we're thrilled to support you in any way that you need. So thank you so much.